Some roads carry memories of distant journeys. Others carry scars, but Highway 666, it carries something far darker. Late one October evening, Caleb Martinez packed up his old pickup truck. He was driving home to New Mexico from a family reunion in Colorado. The reunion had been bittersweet, a chance to reconnect with family while mourning his late grandmother, whose stories about the supernatural had shaped much of his childhood. Caleb remembered her warning about the Devil's Highway. "Don't ever drive it alone at night, Mijo," she'd said, her voice trembling. "It's a road where the shadows come alive." That warning echoed in Caleb's mind as he got onto Route 491, formerly Highway 666. He hadn't wanted to take the route, which was a detour leaving him with no other alternatives. The road stretched before him, an endless ribbon cutting through barren desert under a moonless sky. As the hours passed, the monotonous vibration of his truck's tires started lulling Caleb into a trance. That is when he noticed it, a figure by the roadside. The individual was wearing a black cloak, their face veiled under a wide-brimmed hat. Caleb's stomach tightened. He debated whether to stop, but remembered his grandmother's stories about hitchhikers who vanish and figures that beckon drivers to their doom. He pressed on, eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. The figure didn't move but seemed to grow smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely. A chill ran down his spine. He turned up the radio to drown the silence, but static crackled through the speakers. Around midnight, Caleb saw something up ahead. A car pulled over on the shoulder, its hazard lights blinking. A woman was standing next to it, waving frantically. Against his better judgment, Caleb slowed down. "Need some help," he called out, rolling down the window slightly. The woman's eyes were wide with panic. "My car died. I don't know what to do." Reluctantly, Caleb stepped out of his truck, flashlight in hand. The desert air was icy, and the oppressive quiet made every sound the crunch of gravel. The faint whistle of wind seemed louder. As Caleb approached the car, he noticed something strange. The hood was cool to the touch, as if it hadn't been running for hours. Before he could say anything, the woman grabbed his arm. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't let them take me." The noise of engines roared from the distance. Headlights began to appear on the horizon, weaving erratically. A convoy of black, souped-up trucks was speeding toward them, their engines growling like feral beasts. "Get in the truck," Caleb shouted, dragging the woman toward his vehicle. They barely made it inside before the first truck slammed to a stop alongside them. Caleb slammed on the gas, his old pickup groaning in protest as it lurched forward. The black trucks gave chase, their headlights blinding and their horns blaring. The woman clutched the dashboard, her face pale. "They're not human," she muttered. Caleb checked in the rearview mirror. The drivers' faces were obscured, but their movements were jerky, unnatural. One truck veered dangerously close, its grille almost kissing Caleb's bumper. Thinking on his feet, Caleb turned off his headlights and swerved onto a dirt path, kicking up a cloud of dust to obscure their trail. He killed the engine and motioned for the woman to stay quiet. The black trucks roared past, their lights slicing through the darkness. There was a moment of silence. Caleb exhaled, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. "What in the hell is going on?" he demanded. The woman shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "They've been chasing me since I broke down. I thought I could outrun them, but..." She did not get a chance to finish when a deafening howl pierced the night. It was not the sound of wolves or coyotes, but something far more sinister. Caleb's blood ran cold. Deciding it wasn't safe to stay put, Caleb turned the truck around and continued deeper into the desert. The woman said nothing, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. That's when they saw them, shadowy figures lining the roadside, their forms barely distinguishable from the darkness. "Don't look at them," the woman warned. "Just keep driving." Caleb's hands tightened on the wheel as the figures seemed to lean closer, their indistinct faces turning toward the truck. One stepped onto the road, forcing Caleb to swerve. The truck skidded, but he managed to regain control. "What are they?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Lost souls," the woman replied, "trapped here." As dawn broke, Caleb and the woman approached a small gas station. Its flickering neon sign was a beacon. They stumbled inside where an old attendant eyed them warily. "You came off 491, didn't you?" the man asked. Caleb nodded, too exhausted to speak. The attendant shook his head. "Used to be Highway 666. That road's cursed. Always has been. Folks disappear, accidents happen, and some say the devil himself walks it." Caleb glanced at the woman, but she was gone. He spun round, searching the tiny gas station, but there was no trace of her. "The hell?" Caleb muttered. The attendant gave him a knowing look. "Happens more than you'd think. People pick up hitchhikers who aren't really there." Back on the highway, Caleb couldn't remove from his mind that it had been something much, much bigger than he might understand. When he arrives at home, he picks an old photograph of the grandmother holding a young female figure. It was one of the hitchhikes. His grandmother's statement, he remembered, "You should never drive it lonely in the night." Caleb never drove Route 491 again, but often wondered if the woman was a spirit seeking help or something darker. Either way, he'd be yet another story tied to the infamous Devil's Highway, a road where past and present collide and the shadows never sleep. Some roads carry memories, others carry scars, but Highway 666, it carries souls. Before moving on to the next story, if this is your first time, make sure to subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon for the next stories. We need your support. Please share these stories with your friends and family. Thank you. There's something inherently eerie about long stretches of desolate highways. The endless horizon, the silence broken only by the hum of tires, and the isolation make for a setting that's both tranquil and unnerving. For decades, drivers have reported unexplained encounters on these lonely roads. This is the story of 3 people who experienced something on those highways they can never forget. These aren't UFO stories. These are fear, awe, and this unshakable sense that they were not alone. The shifts of Sarah required driving late at night through broad stretches of the countryside for patients in remote areas. One such night she took Route 45, famous among locals for its eerie happenings. The moon hung low, casting an otherworldly glow over the empty road. Sarah adjusted her rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of 2 faint lights in the distance. At first, she dismissed them as a distant truck, but as the miles passed, the lights grew brighter, closer, and oddly higher. They weren't headlights, Sarah recounted later. They hovered like they were watching me. Her chest tightened with discomfort. She hit the accelerator again, hoping to outdrive whatever was behind her. But the lights mirrored her movements, accelerating and staying a distance from her. When she slowed, so did they. Her heart pounded as realization dawned. It's following me. Then came the most chilling moment. The lights veered off the road, cutting across the fields and reappearing ahead of her car. They were not headlights at all. They were 2 glowing orbs, pulsating faintly, as if alive. Her instinct screamed at her to stop, but something in the lights seemed to call her forward. As she drew near to the orbs, her car's radio crackled into static. The engine coughed and sputtered, and then the lights shot upwards into the sky and were gone, leaving Sarah sitting there in the oppressive quiet. To this day, Sarah avoids Route 45. Whatever it was, she says, it wasn't from here and it wasn't friendly. Marcus had been driving trucks for over 30 years and thought he'd seen it all. But nothing prepared him for what he encountered on a deserted stretch of I-71 winter night. It was about 2 a.m., and a snowstorm had the visibility down to feet. Marcus slowly moved on the icy road when he spotted a faint blue glow. He thought it might be a rest stop or possibly emergency vehicles, but getting closer, he could tell that it was not a huge, disc-shaped object hovering silently above the highway. It wasn't making a sound, Marcus said, his voice trembling even years later. Something that big should have been roaring like a jet, but there was nothing, just silence. The object was enormous, with lights circling its edges that pulsed rhythmically. It hovered about 30 feet above the ground, blocking the entire highway. Marcus slammed on the brakes, his truck skidding to a halt mere yards from the craft. The air felt heavy, almost oppressive, as if the atmosphere itself had thickened. Then, the lights on the craft began to change color, shifting from blue to green to a blinding white. Marcus covered his eyes, feeling a sense of dread overwhelm him. A strange vibration was coursing through his body, not painful but profoundly unsettling, like he was being scanned. Then, it was as if eternity passed, and the craft shot straight up into the sky at an impossible speed and disappeared. Marcus sat there frozen in his truck, unable to move or think. The road ahead was empty, as if nothing had ever been there. Marcus quit trucking a few months later. "I couldn't drive at night anymore," he admitted. "Every time I saw a light in the distance, my heart would stop. I couldn't live like that." Emily and Jake were driving to a music festival, taking a scenic route through the Arizona desert. The sun had long gone down, and only its headlights and a few points of starlight lit the way. They laughed and chatted as they approached the festival, the fun of their trip keeping their eyes open late into the night. Then they saw a car parked loosely by the side of the road. Its hazard lights were blinking weakly, and the driver's door hung open. Emily insisted that they stop to check if someone needed help. "It felt wrong from the start," Jake said later. "The whole scene was too quiet, too still." As they approached the car, a faint buzzing sound filled the air. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Emily peered inside the vehicle but found it empty. The keys were still in the ignition, and a half-full coffee cup sat in the cup holder, steam rising into the cold night air. That's when they saw the lights. At first, there were just a few faint glimmers in the sky, but they quickly grew brighter and descended toward the desert floor. The buzzing intensified, becoming almost deafening. Emily and Jake sprinted back to their car, their hearts pounding. As they zoomed away, the lights trailed them, hovering over the ground. Emily glanced through the rearview mirror, letting out a scream as the abandoned car was now gone. Instead, in its place, stood the tall, shadowy figure with eyes glowing with a light of unearthly sheen. The couple drove for hours, not stopping until they reached a crowded gas station. When they told the clerk what had happened, she paled and said, "You're not the first. People see things out there all the time. Best to stay off those roads at night. Highways are more than just stretches of asphalt. They're thresholds between the known and the unknown." The following year, for Sarah, Marcus, Emily, and Jake, their encounters left them jolted, questioning all that they thought they had known. Were these some kind of glimpses of other worlds, extraterrestrial beings, or just something else? We shall never know. The next time you are driving alone down a deserted road at night, keep looking to the sky. You will know what is watching you by then.